Week 9 of the NFL season is in the books, and after Week 8, where it seemed to be blowout after blowout, Week 9 was much more competitive and one of the best weeks of the season we've had so far. And through 9 weeks of the NFL season, there is no clear team that looks to be a Super Bowl favorite. There are teams like the Broncos and Patriots, who have each won 6 in a row, that look good in the AFC, as do a few other AFC teams, and there are teams like the Eagles, Rams, and Seahawks, among others, who look good in the NFC. And in today's video, we're going to break down the biggest winners and losers from the 9th week of the NFL season. And I'll be honest, there were a lot more winners in week 9 than usual, and you can probably think of several off the top of your head. And if your team is not mentioned or discussed in the video, trust me, they will be at the end. And of course, we'll break down the biggest losers of week 9 too. And there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. The Bears beat the Bengals in week 9 with a score of 47-42, and this was a huge game for Caleb Williams specifically because, whether you know this or not, Caleb Williams was quietly in a 4-game skid heading into this game. And we discussed in a video that was released last week where Caleb Williams was one of the biggest question marks for the remainder of the 2025 season. He had the big 4 passing touchdown game against the Cowboys in week 3, which again was against the Cowboys defense, and had just 2 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions in the ensuing 4 games. And for clarity, I wasn't going to be out on Caleb Williams if he didn't have a good game against the Bengals defense, which we can all acknowledge is a very bad defense, but there were going to be eyebrows raised. And for Caleb Williams to have 4 total touchdowns in week 9, albeit there were some growing pains within this game, but still, that makes him and the Bears one of the biggest winners from week 9. Colston Loveland was also a prospect I liked a lot coming out of Michigan, and I was frustrated with his usage in the first 7 games of the year because I thought this was a player that could produce a lot more than he has, and for him to have a 6-catch, 118-yard, 2-touchdown game, and a touchdown when this team needed it most is also huge for him and the Bears. And a little spoiler, grading the 2025 NFL Draft midway through their rookie year video will be out this Saturday, and this game definitely will boost Colston Loveland's grade as he had 118 yards of his 234 yards on the year in week 9. And what I think also makes the Bears winners is they play the Giants next week and the Vikings and Steelers in the following 2 weeks, and I'm not saying the Bears are going to be 8-3, but the path for them is there. And for the Bears specifically, they're also winners from week 9 because the Lions and Packers both lost too. And when you can get a win where your quarterback looks good and the top 2 teams in your division lose, well, that's a really good day no matter how you slice it. One big note here is we did not include the Bears defense for a reason, and even Bears fans would acknowledge how much of an Achilles heel the defense is, but putting up 47 points and even having your 7th round rookie running back go for 198 total yards in Kyle Monangai makes the Bears big winners from week 9. Now, on the other side of this, the Detroit Lions are in today's video as one of the biggest losers for a couple of reasons. They're not in today's video just because they lost at home. It's how they lost and the magnitude of everything leading up to this game. The Lions were coming off of a bye, and we mentioned this in the week 9 recap, but the Lions have not put up more than 24 points since October 5th, and their offense did not look good in week 9 against Minnesota. The Vikings defense was fast and physical, and outside of the big touchdown to Sam Laporta at the beginning of the game, they were in Jared Goff's face all day. And not only that, but the Lions only ran for 65 yards as a team, and there was a tweet from Al Karsten, who is a Lions writer for the Pride of Detroit, that said the Lions had an offensive success rate of just 33.3%, which was their worst game since week 10 of 2021 and the second worst of the Dan Campbell era. And again, the Lions are not in today's video because of one loss. It's because this was a game coming off of a bye, and truly credit where it's due, the Lions absolutely owned the Vikings in 2024, and in 2 games against Minnesota last year, Jahmyr Gibbs had 330 total yards and 6 touchdowns, and no, that's not an exaggeration. And for Jahmyr Gibbs to only have 28 total yards in week 9, along with the rest of the offense playing the way they did, and playing the way they have for a few weeks now, well, there's a lot of questions for offensive coordinator John Morton. Next up is the Pittsburgh Steelers and one player in particular, and that's pass rusher Alex Highsmith. Now, usually there's a game or two a year where the Steelers are underdogs at home, and they're playing a team that it does not look like they're going to be able to beat on paper, and that was this type of game on Sunday. The Colts had a case that if they did not have a touchback go out of bounds whenever they were about to score the football, they could be an 8-0 team. I mean, this was a really high-flying offense, and it didn't look like the Steelers were going to be able to slow them down, not just because the Colts were that good, but because the Steelers had also allowed 68 total points in the previous 2 weeks, 33 in week 7 to the Bengals, and of course 35 to the Packers last week on Sunday Night Football. But usually there's a game or two a year where the Steelers play what I like to call classic Pittsburgh Steelers smash mouth football, and a lot of the time I kind of assume that people know what that means, but if you don't know what that means, basically what that means is the Steelers are an underdog at home, and they may have a game where they average less than 3 yards per carry, they may have less than 250 yards of offense. It's going to be a really ugly game in a lot of ways, and they're also probably going to force 3 or 4 turnovers, and the final score is going to be something along the lines of 16-13, 13-10, and ultimately the Steelers are going to come out on top. Now, the Steelers did come out on top 27-20 in a game where they forced 6 turnovers. Now, why I include Alex Highsmith in particular is he already had a good game. His 3 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble are already really good, but there was one play in particular where technically nothing comes up on the stat sheet. I mean, it was a pressure from Highsmith, but it's not like it's a sack or a tackle or anything that anybody's going to take note of unless you specifically watch the play. But Indy called Tyler Warren in motion, and with Jalen Ramsey traveling with Tyler Warren, the Steelers were giving clear indication that it was going to be man-to-man coverage pre-snap. Daniel Jones, of course, knows this, and he wanted to go to Tyler Warren post-snap, and this was kind of a bad game by DJ in a lot of ways, but this play in particular was a play where Daniel Jones, and for anyone who wants to get the Daniel jokes in, this was a play where you could very much point to this and say, hey, if this is a sign of things to come for Daniel Jones, then the Colts are in trouble. Now, we're not having that conversation, at least right now at this point in the video, but anyway, with this play in particular, Daniel Jones was staring down Tyler Warren from the minute the ball was snapped, and he immediately came back and wanted to hit his hot route, but Peyton Wilson jumped the ball, and whenever this play was happening, Alex Highsmith, all in the midst of Daniel Jones staring down Tyler Warren and Peyton Wilson jumping the route, he steamed off the line as he beat Bernard Ryman, and Alex Highsmith did this multiple times in this game as he, again, had a tremendous week 9 and forced Daniel Jones to speed up his process. Now, because Daniel Jones was staring down Tyler Warren from the second the ball was snapped, he thought that he could have Josh Downs on the hot route underneath, but Peyton Wilson jumped the route, and Peyton Wilson's assignment on this play was to cover Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, and the reality is everything happens at the NFL level in the blink of an eye. So I don't know what gave Peyton Wilson the inclination to jump the route and to bounce back in, but it was a hell of a play because, again, his assignment was to cover Jonathan Taylor. So for Alex Highsmith to speed Daniel Jones' internal clock up and to force him to make this play, well, it ultimately resulted in an interception for the Steelers and a play that a couple of plays later, Aaron Rodgers ended up hitting Pat Freiermuth for a 12-yard touchdown. And these are the types of plays whenever we talk about Pittsburgh Steelers classic football that it's always going to be a team win. It's always going to be the defense coming up in some way to make a turnover and to be able to give the Steelers a short drive and for them to capitalize on opportunities. And Alex Highsmith and the Pittsburgh Steelers, they, especially the defense, had a tremendous week 9 and they forced, again, 5 turnovers technically because there was a muffed punt, but the Steelers are big winners from week 9 because in some ways their backs were against the wall, and I would argue that this was a must-win game. Next up is the Carolina Panthers and running back Rico Dowdle, and they're in today's video for a couple of reasons, not just because they beat the Packers in week 9, but one of the reasons they're in today's video is because of how they responded from a week 8 loss to the Buffalo Bills. Now, whether you know this or not, a lot of people have moved from Western New York and Buffalo to the Charlotte area, whether it be because of a job or simply because of warmer weather, because, well, Buffalo can get a little cold and snowy in the winter. So, in a lot of ways, the week 8 game against the Bills was in some ways kind of a Bills home game because of how many Bills fans were in the stadium, and then you throw in the fact that James Cook ran for over 200 yards, the Bills won by 31 points, and the fact that Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, because of a coach's decision and ultimately Dave Canales' decision, split carries more than they should have despite Rico Dowdle being a top 5 running back this year. Well, there was a lot of media pressure for Dave Canales all week, and for the Panthers to go into Lambeau as double-digit underdogs and near 2-touchdown underdogs undoubtedly makes them big winners from week 9. This was also a very abnormal game because there were only 14 total possessions. There was only one 3-and-out in the game, and it was the Panthers' very first drive of the game. And given the fact that the Panthers, like we mentioned, were near 2-touchdown underdogs, it would have been very Panther, at least in the past couple of years, to kind of roll over and say, hey, we're on the road against the Packers. We went 3-and-out. We're going to just roll over. They're going to be up 21-0 at half, and hopefully we'll have a garbage time touchdown or two and, make the score look pretty and hopefully finish 35-21. But they didn't. The Panthers intercepted Jordan Love. They also capitalized on a Brandon McManus missed field goal, and it was really nice to see the Panthers capitalize on missed opportunities rather than kind of have it be the other way around the way that it has been over the past couple of years. And it was also really good for both Rico Dowdle to officially capture the starting running back job and for Dave Canales to right the wrong that they had in Week 8. And why I also think the Panthers are big Week 9 winners is their next two games are home against the Saints and at the Falcons, and I think we can all have the conversation, or at least acknowledge that neither of those teams are going to be Super Bowl champions this year and that they're not at least amongst the elite of elite. So what I will not do in the biggest Week 9 winners and losers is talk about the Panthers being a playoff team and maybe they are a 7 or 6 seed, but what I will say is if they are 7-4 14 days from now, which is a very real possibility based on who their next two opponents are, we can have that conversation in 2 weeks. But for now, for the Panthers to go into Lambeau as near 2-touchdown underdogs, Rico Dowdle to capture the starting running back job and go for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns makes the Panthers big winners from Week 9. Next up is Sam Darnold and the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks were coming off of their Week 8 bye, and they played an extremely efficient game against the Commanders in Week 9 and were up 38-7 before the end of the third quarter. And in the first half alone, Sam Darnold was 16 of 16 for 282 yards and 4 touchdowns, along with a perfect passer rating. And the Commanders, among many other decisions we'll discuss later in the video, made a poor choice to continuously play man coverage against the Seahawks, and you saw how it worked out. Jackson Smith-Njigba had 129 yards, Torrey Horton, a player I absolutely loved coming out of Colorado State this year, had 2 touchdowns, and even rookie Elijah Arroyo had a touchdown too. This was a clinic by the Seahawks offensively, and one thought that I had during this game was that Clint Kubiak will be one of the hottest names as a head coaching candidate this offseason. And also within this win for Seattle, Mike Macdonald became the third coach in NFL history to start his coaching career 11-1 on the road, as he joined Sean McVay and George Seifert as the only other head coaches to do so, both of which were Super Bowl champion head coaches. Sam Darnold is also in the MVP conversation as he has 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions on the year, and despite how good Darnold played last year for Minnesota, in a year he finished with 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns, he's playing even better this year. The Seahawks play the Cardinals next week, which is a very winnable game for them, and based on how Seattle plays on the road under Mike Macdonald, I think it's safe to assume they'll beat the Rams in Week 11 at SoFi, probably by double digits. And jokes aside, when this team is on, they're on. And to put up 38 points on a cross-country road trip and have your quarterback look the way Sam Darnold did in Week 9 undoubtedly makes the Seahawks one of the biggest winners from Week 9. Now, the Falcons unfortunately lost a close game in New England as they lost 24-23, and there's several frustrating things about this game for Atlanta, but I think it's becoming more of a consensus that Atlanta is always going to be limited with this coaching staff. And all things considered, this was a very winnable game for the Falcons. I mean, Michael Penix threw 3 touchdowns, and if you want to say Drake London is an individual winner as he had 3 touchdowns, by all means go for it, but they also forced 2 turnovers and started the following possession with the ball on their own 49-yard line on one of the turnovers and the New England 6-yard line off the other turnover. But what's also frustrating with the Falcons is, and another huge reason they're in today's video, is the offense, and specifically the play calling. If you have seen Falcons fans online at any point in the past month or so, then you've probably seen Zach Robinson posts, and understandably so. I am a firm believer that Atlanta, talent-wise, is a lot better than 3-5, and it's frustrating going back through the tape every week, knowing how many times they're limited because of the offense. And one of the things Zach Robinson likes to do is call swing routes to Bijan Robinson out of the backfield to try and get the ball in his hands, but the problem is everyone knows it's coming. And the Falcons did that on the very first play of the game in Week 9, which resulted in a 2-yard gain. Michael Penix was then sacked on 2nd down, and on 3rd and 12, nobody was open, and it was an incomplete pass, and the Falcons started the day with a 3-and-out. And not only that, but I think we can all agree Bijan Robinson is a very talented player, and if you had to guess guess how many carries he had in the first half against New England on Sunday? Well, if you guessed 4, you would be correct. And I don't think there's a huge talent difference between the Patriots and Falcons roster. I really don't, but this was a game for Atlanta that I didn't think they would win, largely due to coaching. And the Falcons are also in today's video because even if they put together a few wins down the stretch, in a lot of ways, this is a wasted year because of how poor the coaching with this team is at times. And the reality is, they could very easily be 4-4 through 8 games. Next up is the Bills, Broncos, and Chargers, and we'll start with the Bills because they are the biggest reason that all 3 of these teams are winners from Week 9, and it's because they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, whenever you think of the Bills and Chiefs rivalry, you probably think that the Bills win the regular season games and that the Chiefs, well, the Chiefs win the postseason games as they're 4-0 in the Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen era in the playoffs. But the Bills are big winners from Week 9, not just because they beat the Chiefs in the regular season, but because of how they beat the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes completed less than 50% of his passes, and I do think you have to credit the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes to some degree for keeping the game alive the way they did, and there were a couple of really big timely plays for the Chiefs within this game, most notably the 4th and 17, and then the opportunity to get the ball back after the Buffalo missed field goal. And I know everybody in Western New York was definitely sweating at the end of the game because they were definitely preparing for a 29-28 final, thinking that the Chiefs could get the touchdown and then score the 2-point conversion and win in regulation. But they didn't. And Buffalo won 28-21, and they're not just big winners from Week 9 because they beat the Chiefs, but they're also big winners because they also kept up with the Patriots, who are currently leading the AFC East with a 7-2 record, and who also beat the Bills in Buffalo earlier in the year. Buffalo has also now scored 68 points off their bye, as like we mentioned earlier, they put up 40 last week against Carolina, and then they put up 28 points in Week 9 against Kansas City. So for Buffalo to have back-to-back games of 400 plus yards and to average 34 points since coming off of their Week 7 bye, well, that's a really good step in the right direction, and the reality is the Patriots' schedule is a lot easier than most, so Buffalo is going to have to keep winning if they want to host at least 1, if not 2, final home playoff games at Highmark Stadium. And why the Broncos and Chargers are in today's video is because the big bad Kansas City Chiefs lost, and that helps you out within the AFC West division race. Denver is, I would personally say, more of a winner in Week 9 than the Chargers, but look, they're 7-2, and they've now won 6 in a row, and that's huge, especially with the way they've won some of these games. They obviously had the very ugly Jets win a couple of weeks ago, and then they were down several points against the Giants, and several points is doing a lot of heavy work there, and they came back to beat the Giants, and now they beat the Houston Texans in Week 9. And again, what was an ugly win, but an ugly win is always better than a pretty loss. So for the Broncos to be 7-2 and to play the Raiders next week, who have been struggling, and we're going to exclude Brock Bowers from that, but a team that's been struggling, well, Denver can very easily be 8-2 before they play the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 11. The Chargers are still very much in the AFC West playoff race, and they did beat the Broncos earlier in the year as well. So for the Chargers to have the Chiefs lose and to still stay in the AFC West playoff race, I mean, look, let's just call it what it is. Whenever the Kansas City Chiefs lose, the Raiders, Broncos, and Chargers all rejoice because of how much winning that franchise has done over the past decade. I don't want to harp too much on the Washington Commanders because they lost their quarterback for an extended period of time, but what I will harp on is the decision to keep Jaden Daniels in the game, in a game that, if we are being completely honest, everybody knew was over at half. Now, what I am not advocating for is, hey, we're down 24 points at half, let's throw in the towel, there's absolutely zero chance of coming back. I don't think the Commanders would have came back regardless, but when you are down 30 points in the fourth quarter, I think it is perfectly acceptable to throw in the towel at that point because they are professional athletes and there is a tomorrow. A Week 9 game against the Seahawks on Sunday Night Football was not the Super Bowl where there is no tomorrow. I thought it was a perfectly acceptable decision to remove all of the starters after the third quarter, and there was also a play late in the third quarter where Jaden Daniels was thrown down really hard, and I had the thought in my mind at that point that I wouldn't want my franchise quarterback taking those types of hits down 30 points at home in a Week 9 game, but unfortunately even worse things happened later, and I do think Dan Quinn is one of the biggest losers from Week 9 for keeping Jaden Daniels in the game that was completely over to begin with. I really feel bad for Commanders fans for obvious reasons. I feel bad for Jaden Daniels for obvious reasons, but he should have never been in the game, and whenever you are down 30 plus points in a regular season game, it's pretty simple. Take your starters out and move on the next week. I don't want to harp too much on the Cincinnati Bengals because I kind of feel like they're the low-hanging fruit and everybody knows that, and with this Week 9 game against Chicago in which they lost 47-42, they're now 1-4 in games since the start of the 2024 season in which they put up 38 points. So I really do feel bad for guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and I know Joe Burrow didn't play in this game, but to consistently give everything you have and to, again, be 1-4 since the start of the 24 season is really unfortunate. But again, I feel like the Bengals are the low-hanging fruit. But on a more positive note, the 49ers looked really good offensively against the Giants in Week 9. Mac Jones finished the first half 14-14, and he played pretty well, all things considered. And I'm really happy for Mac Jones to continue the success that he's having. And Christian McCaffrey also had the 16th game of his career in which he had a rushing and receiving touchdown, and he also had over 160 total yards. Now, you guys know I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. JJ McCarthy, soft benching finally over. 3 total touchdowns and a 27-24 victory against a team he would not beat since Jahmyr Gibbs was still playing for the University of Alabama. And in the great words of Jonathan James McCarthy, like a dog in the streets. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe as we are closing in on 220,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.